two men, two opposing visions of how to stop a no-deal Brexit. But who has the numbers? Tonight, a letter from Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn to other party leaders and senior Conservative rebels, calling for their support for a vote of no confidence and then an interim Labour government which would seek another extension from the EU and hold a general election. Earlier today, the Shadow Education Secretary told Newsnight the Conservative rebels need to step up.
Well, we have absolutely no confidence in Boris Johnson, and actually if you hear Philip Hammond and others today from the Conservative side, they don't have any confidence in Boris Johnson or his government. So I absolutely believe that we need those members from the Conservative Party. We can't win a no confidence vote without those Conservative members doing the right thing, and I think people have got to put their country before party and vote for it. We will table that motion as soon as we can, but we need people to vote for it.
But rebels tend to want to rebel their own way. Earlier, the former Chancellor launched an attack on his new Prime Minister, but suggested the plan of action was not a vote of no confidence, but backbenchers once again attempting to take control in Parliament.
I'm very confident that the means exist for Parliament to make its voice heard.
And so this will be a numbers game, but both sides have rebels. It's about who'll vote for what and when. Boris Johnson's government currently has a working majority of just one, made up of Conservatives and their DUP partners. And when it comes to pushing through a no-deal Brexit, that wafer-thin majority will be under assault from two fronts. Of course, from the actual opposition, but also Conservative rebels who are unhappy with the prospect of a no-deal. And recently their numbers have swelled considerably, perhaps by as many as 15 or 16. They include former ministers like Philip Hammond, David Gauke and Greg Clark. Plus there are others who've abstained on votes in the past who may now be more likely to rebel if the prospect of a no deal becomes more certain. On the opposition benches, there are few fans of Boris Johnson's administration, but there are a handful of well-known Labour Brexiteers and MPs from Brexit voting constituencies, perhaps as many as 10 to 15, who could side with the government or abstain depending on the vote. The numbers are tight, and it seems to be a sliding scale. If there's a vote of no confidence, which in theory triggers that general election Jeremy Corbyn wants, then most, if not all, of Labour's Brexit sympathising MPs would vote for it. But the number of Conservative rebels willing to vote against their own government could fall away. Conversely, if Conservative rebels lead the charge on trying to seize control of parliamentary time to prevent no deal, then even if the Labour front bench backs them, some Labour Brexiteers have told me they simply wouldn't give their support. Ultimately, it may come down to timing. What comes first? With Conservative rebels reportedly plotting a parliamentary showdown for September the 9th, they're unlikely to grab at the Labour leader's offer. If they play their hand and lose, well, things might change. Although the other players may have their own preconditions for Jeremy Corbyn.
I am prepared to work with him to secure a people's vote, absolutely, but I recognise that he doesn't command support right across the House of Commons, and of course he has not been much use, frankly, on the issue of Brexit today. It's very difficult to trust what he says because he has been arguing that he wants to deliver a Labour Brexit, and it doesn't matter if you put a red rosette on it or a blue rosette on it, Brexit is going to be disastrous for the country.
As Number 10 readies itself to fight battles on multiple fronts when Parliament returns in September, perhaps Boris Johnson's best hope, if he doesn't get a deal, is that those opposed to a no-deal Brexit simply can't agree on how to try and stop it.
We'll hear from a representative of Labour's shadow cabinet, Tony Lloyd, in just a moment. But the big question tonight is, will the opposition parties agree? We've got Stephen Gethins from the SNP joining us from our studio in Dundee and Chuka Umunna from the Lib Dems here in the studio. And for the benefit of our audience, we're actually going to do something a bit different this evening. We're going to start with both of you and we're going to ask you a question which we'd like you to reply with one word. Yes, no, or maybe. If you could stick to those rules, that would just be great. And then we will come back to you in more detail. I'll go to you first, Stephen Gethins. Yeah. Will the SNP support putting Mr Corbyn into Number 10 in a caretaker government, but as the Prime Minister, post a vote of no confidence in Mr Johnson? Yes, no, or maybe?
Well, we'll certainly vote in favour of a motion of no confidence. We've got no confidence in this government.
Yes, no, or maybe?
Well, we've got no confidence in this government, and let's get a no-deal Brexit off the table first. I think you're getting a little bit...
I'm sorry, it's
but come on, you're getting a wee
minute.
bit ahead of yourself here.
You failed the first hurdle. Chuka, Umunna, do you care to take the challenge? Is it yes, no, or maybe from the Lib Dems?
It's a no, because he cannot command the confidence of his own MPs, never mind a majority in the House of Commons.
Can I come back to you in more detail very shortly then? Let's hear from Labour, who are pushing this forward. First of all, Tony Lloyd, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
It's already dead in the water, isn't it, without the Lib Dems? They've just given a very clear answer there through Chuka Umunna.
Well, I hope that Chuka, I hope the Lib Dems will think again. Look, we're in violent agreement on the things that we do want. We want to stop the disastrous no-deal Brexit with its impact on everything from food, medicines, investment, jobs, industry, etc. We want to make sure that through the vote of no confidence we can move, and I think again it'll become an agreement. Labour's made it very clear that there would be a caretaker government, very limited, very focused around one objective, which is to deliver a general election where different parties then could campaign. But we're clear again. We would campaign to make sure there was a second referendum. We would make sure that Remain was on that ballot paper. Now, within that, I'm almost bound to ask, what is there to disagree with if we're going to make sure we're putting personalities behind?
Tony Lloyd, we'll come to Chuka Umunna in more detail and Stephen Gethins from the SNP in just a moment. But it seems quite clear from already the comments from Joe Swinson, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, the thing to disagree about is Jeremy Corbyn. So let me ask you this question.
Sure.
That's the view that will be, I'm sure, expanded upon in just a moment. Would you, as the Labour Party, we just heard a clip there, we'll hear more later, of Angela Rayner, the Shadow Education Secretary, saying it's time to put, country before party. Would the Labour Party sacrifice Jeremy Corbyn if that was the block here?
Well, I'm bound to make the point that Jeremy Corbyn, first of all, is the leader of the biggest opposition party. I know that Ian Blackford, Liz Saville-Roberts, Caroline Lucas have all given, albeit guarded, welcome to Jeremy Corbyn's proposal. I think it's now time to get away from the personalities, say, look, a time-limited and very focused caretaker government gives no political advantage to any of the parties involved. What it does do is it gets the country out of the crisis we're in. A crisis when, quite frankly, we've got the Prime Minister accusing, or at least perhaps Dominic Cummings, accusing his own party members.
We will get onto that in more detail. But one of the sticking points already, beyond Jeremy Corbyn perhaps, is promising to have a general election before the people's vote, the so-called people's vote. Could you not flip that to get everybody on board, potentially?
Well, I would think everybody would be on board with the view that we need, in any case, to establish a parliamentary majority that could deliver that people's vote, which is why the general election would be part of it.
And how are you going to convince Conservatives? Because it hasn't been the friendliest, I think it's safe to say, between Labour and the Conservatives of late. It's all fine to say, we need to put country before party, but Conservatives will find it difficult to come over to anything with Jeremy Corbyn's name on it, as you would the other way around.
But this isn't about personalities. It now is very focused. It's very focused in saying a caretaker government with a very limited mandate and a very short time horizon to deliver that general election, to deliver a parliamentary majority that can deliver that second referendum. That's clear. And actually all of the opposition...
What are you going to do to woo them? Yes, they know all of that. What are you going to do apart from hope?
It's nothing to do with hope. It's a matter of practical fact that this is the rational, sensible way of moving the country away from crisis, away from the prospect of a crash-out Brexit in a few weeks' time.
Tony Lloyd,
more rational.
Tony Lloyd, thank you very much indeed. In a moment, we'll come to Chuka Umunna from the Lib Dems, but you'll forgive me if I go to the second largest opposition party, which is Stephen Gethins of the SNP. You couldn't answer yes, no, or maybe in response, but you do sound like Ian Blackford does sound like this evening, and SNP as a whole, that you are at least considering this.
Well, yes, absolutely.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we want to see the back of this dangerous, frankly dangerous Tory government, and we'll absolutely vote that we've got no confidence in this government. And as Nicola Sturgeon made clear, we'll happily work with the Labour Party as well. We'll work with our colleagues in the Liberal Democrats too. But what we also need to do, we need to ensure this, is that we need to take no deal off the table. There's a sense of immediacy with that. And I think we're in the same place with the Liberal Democrats on that as well. That just needs to go. And then we need to move forward from there. Let's get rid of this Tory government. I also want to hear from Labour, are you a Remain party or are you a Leave party? Because I want us to remain in the European Union.
But can I just be very clear on something which is very different this evening? Because you have been saying things along these lines for some time now. You've been consistent in your message. What's different this evening is the request for you to not only support a vote of no confidence, but to have Jeremy Corbyn as the interim caretaker Prime Minister in number 10. Let me ask you this clearly. Do you have a problem with Jeremy Corbyn being put in number 10 in that respect?
We don't have a problem with Jeremy Corbyn if he command the House or get a majority there being in number 10. We've said we'd work with the Labour Party. But, you know, Ian Blackford wrote to Jeremy Corbyn 2 weeks ago. Jeremy Corbyn has just responded to that letter this evening, and you've just been given it tonight as well. And I think it's important to sit down around the table, talk about this. We've got about 2.5, 3 weeks before Parliament returns. Let's get this right, but let's get no deal off the table.
Okay,
that is a matter of urgency.
That's an interesting moment to pause on where you say you would be OK with Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. Was it something to do with John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, last week at the Edinburgh Festival, saying perhaps Labour wouldn't stand in the way of allowing a second Scottish independence referendum to go ahead, something that he was criticised by his own Scottish Labour MPs?
Well, it's no great secret that the SNP is in favour of independence, but right now we need to get this disastrous and dangerous Tory government out of office. We need to get no deal off the table, and we need to move towards that referendum. Look, we're happy with the general election as well, but critically that referendum will remain as an option.
Stephen Gethins, what would you say to Chuka Umunna and his fellow Lib Dem colleagues? They've increased in number tonight. They've had another defection from Sarah Wollaston. We'll go into that in just a moment. But what would you say to convince the Lib Dems, who are actually saying flat out no at the moment to this offer?
I think we're in a similar place with the Lib Dems. We've worked really closely with them over the past few months as well, which is let's get no deal off the table, let's get this Tory government out, but let's find the best way forward here. And that's something that I think we've got common ground on. We have done for a while now, and it'll be critical that we continue to work together during these crucial weeks in September.
Stephen Gethins, thank you very much for your time. Chuka Umunna, the floor is yours. You've got everything you want with this.
Yes. Well, let me just go through some of those points, both from Tony and Stephen. The first thing is, if this isn't about personalities, then arguably we should not be being prescriptive about who could lead an emergency government. Now, we are not being prescriptive in demanding that our leader is the Prime Minister, and we've been very clear that we are open... Hang on just a minute, let me just answer the various different points. We've also said that we'd be more than happy to entertain either a senior Labour or Conservative figure leading that. Now, the issue is here. Well, ultimately, this thing needs to work, and we know that no Conservative MP would support him becoming Prime Minister. This needs to be an individual...
to bring something inconvenient to your attention. Just on that point before you move on, if I may. Dominic Greaves, someone I know that you've seen eye to eye, a Conservative MP, to remind everybody at home, has said this evening, has told Newsnight, that he's considering this.
Well, he's always been absolutely clear to me that he would absolutely support a vote of no confidence in order to stop no deal.
But he's actually saying he's carefully considering putting Jeremy Corbyn in number 10. This response is being carefully considered. He hasn't done what you've done and dismissed it.
I don't believe that... Well, I have spoken to Dominic about this.
We have.
And he has been absolutely clear with me that stopping no deal does not necessarily mean making Jeremy Corbyn the Prime Minister. But ultimately, look, we can waste time trying to make something happen which is impossible, or we can actually focus on a candidate who can actually make this happen. There's another really important point to make here, which is in Jeremy Corbyn's letter. The Labour Party's position is still to pursue a Labour Brexit and to negotiate an alternative Brexit to facilitate Brexit.
But they will give a people's vote before that.
We do not wish to do that. We wish to stop Brexit altogether.
OK, so you say let's not waste time on focusing on something that isn't going to happen.
Yes.
And it's not going to happen if the Lib Dems don't get behind it.
Well, look, it's not...
it seems.
But Emma, there's one thing actually that is another important point to make. I have spoken to a number of Labour MPs, I used to be one, who also would not support Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister. And I have been saying that now for the best part of 2 weeks. weeks.
Can you name
and
some
nobody,
names?
Well, I'm not going to go and name it so that they name these individuals so they have their wit withdrawn, but I know because there are a number of Labour MPs who've told me they would never, ever countenance
Could you
Jeremy...
give us roughly a number?
It's a substantial minority. I can think of at least 10 to 15 Labour MPs who would not support Jeremy Corbyn becoming the Prime Minister of this country.
And they wouldn't vote in a vote of no confidence?
They have been absolutely clear to me. Well, supporting a vote of no confidence under the Fixed Term Parliaments Act
but under this arrangement
is
this
different.
evening.
No, it's different from... you have two stages.
Yeah.
First of all, you have a vote of no confidence, and then you see if another Prime Minister can form a
But
government.
that second bit they wouldn't do, is what you're saying.
I don't believe they would, no.
But, OK, so the alternative mechanism that the Lib Dems are pursuing, because I don't think equally your leader is the one that's going to get the majority of the support, because you've not given us any evidence that would be the case.
No, and Jo hasn't argued that she would command the majority.
What is the alternative mechanism with 78 days to go that you are pursuing that's a winning one?
Well, look, Parliament has at its disposal a number of tools that enable it to stop a no-deal Brexit. There's no doubt about that. It can take over the parliamentary business of the House of Commons, provide time for a bill to be debated, which, if passed, would force the government to request an extension. So there are many mechanisms available to us.
What if it doesn't bring anything back? What if there is no parliamentary business? What if no one ever gets back around the table?
Well, this is the thing. A lot of people have been saying, no, well, look, you people who are opposed to a no-deal Brexit, you're incapable of marshalling a coalition for anything. Well, that's a load of nonsense. The fact that we're having this debate, the fact that there is a meaningful vote that has been happening in the House of Commons about how we leave the European Union is down to a cross-party coalition backing Dominic Grieve's legislative measures almost 2 years ago.
Dominic Grieve might be
but
backing
hang on,
this
no,
tonight.
hang on just a minute. The other point is you're suggesting that perhaps there'll be no parliamentary business, maybe Parliament could be suspended. It cannot be. Because of the amendments to the Northern Ireland Act, which passed just before the parliamentary recess, Parliament will have to sit up to the 31st of October.
That's what you're betting the House on. Let me ask you, you've got one more to your ranks this evening. Sarah Willison,
Yes.
former Conservative MP, then went down the same route as you to the independent group and now has joined the Liberal Democrats.
Yes.
Any more defections expected? Who are you working on?
Well, look, there are lots of conversations going on and there are lots of people on the train, but only they ultimately know when they arrive at the destination. But Sarah joining us is a huge issue. It's massive. She is a widely respected person across the House of Commons, the chair of the liaison committee, widely respected across the country. And it just underlines the fact that the Liberal Democrats are the biggest and strongest Remain party in this country.
Well, I think some people would debate the biggest, but we will see what goes on
we
in
are.
terms of how they view the Labour Party.
Across the UK.
OK. Chuka, Umunna, thank you very much for your time. I'm sure we'll be talking again.